John chapter 8. There's a lot we could look at. One verse. Verse 12. Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but he will have the light of life. Jesus is here. He's beginning to, I guess you could say, he's beginning to turn up the heat. He's beginning to sort of redirect the conversation. And when I say the conversation of his ministry. 6 months away from the cross at this point. And now as he's surrounded, and we see this as we go chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, and a good portion of chapter 10 are basically all happening approximately the same or within a couple of days of one another. And so now he's turning the conversation. Again, you could say he's turning up the heat. And he says, I'm the light of the world. I'm light. There's a lot you can do with that. A lot of it could be pretty hokey. A lot of it is very meaningful, I think. This is a major change in his ministry in terms of people's understanding of who he is. There's a real change happening here. And I think, if we go back and we think of things that have happened in our lives, some of us, I guess I should take a poll. I know where I was on November 22nd, 1963. I was at home in bed. I was sick. And my mom, it was fourth grade, and my mom was at a student-teacher conference. And I heard that President Kennedy had been shot and killed. I can tell some of you, how many people remember that? A lot of boomers here. Okay. Or actually, it wasn't 6 years later, right? July 20th, 1969? Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. Do you remember that? Yeah. I remember where I was. I remember being at home. We had just come back from the shore and watching on a black and white TV, which I guess was basically a black and white transmission anyhow, and watching this. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. September 11th, 2001, more people would remember that. So the national things, the big societal things that happen, we remember those things. I mean, and I still remember the dates of those things as long ago as they were. The things that have happened in my personal life. I mean, I know I graduated from high school, and I know it was 1972 and it was June. I couldn't tell you the date. I know that I was very happy to get out of there. And I might add, you don't need the story right now, but they were really happy to see me go. They really were. I mean, this is the early 70s. I had already led 2 walkouts on the campus and that kind of thing. And so they were really glad to see me go. The superintendent of schools gave the speech, this charge to the graduating class, and he even said, we didn't think John Hessler would graduate, but we're glad he's leaving. I mean, my parents have never, to the day they died, they never let me forget that. Yeah, he's just a nice guy. Sometime in May 1976, I know I graduated from high school or college. But the date didn't matter to me because it wasn't that important. Yeah, it was important, but I mean, it wasn't that important to me. Now, January 6, 1980, when I got serious with Jesus Christ, I remember that day. January 19, 1980, I met Renee on a blind date. You can tell she's still blind. February 2nd, same year. I didn't see my shadow. The winter was leaving. April 7th, we were engaged. October 18th, we were married. I remember all those days. I remember the dates that my kids were born. I remember those things. They're important to me. We remember these things because they're dramatic moments. That's the only reason I'm giving you the story, right? We remember those things because they're dramatic moments in our life or in the history of our nation or the world, right? And in the history and in the gospel of Jesus Christ, we remember or we should note these dramatic moments that happen. This is a dramatic moment. We don't tend to portray it that way, but this is a dramatic moment because Jesus is turning the conversation. And as he does, now he's going to generate all this discussion, we'll say, that's a nice word for it, with the Pharisees. We don't have time today or in the course of this whole study to go through all 59 verses in chapter 8, but I really recommend that you do that and you take it carefully as you go. Because as you walk through this conversation that goes back and forth, he begins by saying he's the light of the world. Let me just read a few verses here. I'm the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees said to him, you bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true. They're saying it from a Jewish perspective. There was very specific laws about a witness and a testimony. And Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I'm going, but you do not know where I came from or where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Remember that, by the way. We feel like Jesus is judging us all the time. And yet if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I'm not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me. It's also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. They said, where is your Father? Did you notice what they didn't say? They didn't say, who is your Father? They're saying, where is he? Because they know this claim that he was born of a virgin. And so he's been called for a long time a child of fornication. There's another word for that, but I'm not supposed to say it here. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably belong in children's ministry, right? We know what they're saying, what they're accusing him of. Where is your Father, right? And they're probably elbowing each other in the side. Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. Jesus said these words in the treasury, or in the court of the women, as he taught in the temple, and no one laid hands on him, for his hour had not yet come. There's a lot more there, obviously, but as this goes on, Jesus is now going to turn the conversation again in this, and he's going to start talking about their father, about their parentage. He's going to say that, your father has been a liar and a murderer from the beginning, which was not real PC to say. They didn't dig that. There's a lot we could do with this, and there's a lot that applies to us. I just want us to understand this is a dramatic moment because things are changing in the ministry of Jesus Christ here. These remaining 6 months as we go toward the cross, a lot of things are going to change. And I know I've said this many times. The Feast of Tabernacles has occurred. 7-day feast. It ended the day before this. And the Feast of Tabernacles is associated with light. Now, the real Feast of Lights is Hanukkah, okay? But this is considered a feast, a type of a Feast of Lights in one regard. And in the Feast of Tabernacles, it was like a week-long celebration of God's goodness and and thanksgiving to him for all that he had done in the history of Israel throughout their history, but certainly looking back to the wilderness wanderings and all of that. And in fact, let me read this from Leviticus. It says this, Leviticus 23, beginning in verse 34, speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th of the 7th month, so the 15th of Tishri, shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Lord. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. So here it is, the 7th day is gone. That was the day that Jesus spoke up on the Temple Mount and said, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And from his innermost being will flow torrents of living water. Now the 8th day. So remember, what do the numbers mean? 7, completion. It was finished at that point. Now, new beginning, 8th day, begins actually with Jesus teaching in the temple courts and the Pharisees coming up and throwing the woman caught in adultery in front of them. We saw that in the first 11 verses last week. And now here, Jesus, the accusers are gone. Whether the woman's still there or not, I don't know, but I assume that. and all the people who'd come for the Bible study in the first place. This is really early in the morning. This is not like Bucks County where people show up for a 9 o'clock service at 9:15 or something like that. Actually, no, you guys are good. I mean, it's always interesting as you get to the later services. When people show up, sometimes on the fourth song, you know, they say, oh, they got music here too. But you know, the people were hungry. They were hungry for the word. They wanted to hear what Jesus had to say. They're all there still. By the way, going on with that passage in Leviticus 23, speaking of the 7 days, this feast, on the 8th day, the Lord says, you shall have a holy convocation, or we would call it a Shabbat. The holy convocation is another word for Sabbath. There's a lot of Sabbaths that happen in Israel, not just what we call Saturday Sabbath, but a holy convocation, a day set apart. Okay, on the 8th day you'll have a holy convocation. You shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. It's a sacred assembly. You shall do no work on that day. Jesus is about to make an announcement here on the 8th day. He's going to make this announcement that is going to really change the course of all human history. If you think about it, what he says in verse 12 has changed the course of human history. We don't tend to think that. We think of our faith as a very personal thing, and obviously, in many regards, of course it is. But when you look back through history and you see what God has done through believers, and only through believers, what God has done through the church of Jesus Christ, it all begins with what Jesus has done in his earthly ministry. Obviously, the crucifixion, the resurrection are the pinnacle, right? But here, this is where everything changes. I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This idea, the power of light, the nature of light, you know, we don't have a ton of time to go into that one this morning. I know that we don't tend to think much about light. We take it for granted. It's for those of you who enjoy science, I encourage you to study light, to look it up. I mean, the photon is, I already lost half the crowd by saying that. It's energy, but it has mass, which is a really weird concept. It's energy, and yet gravity can affect its flow. I mean, it goes on and on. There's so much about just the photon and the nature of light itself, that one photon and what happens to it somewhere in the universe affects all photons throughout the universe. How does that work? Beats me. God knows. But anyhow, it's a fascinating thing. We can see whatever we see because the light is on. That's the only reason we see anything is because of light. Now, that sounds very obvious, I guess. But we say that someone's wearing a blue shirt because as the light shines on that shirt, what is reflected back toward us are only those wavelengths of light that we call blue. Everything else is absorbed by the dyes, the pigments, whatever may happen be in that garment. It's a fascinating study, and it's part of a spectrum, and only a little bitty part of the spectrum is visible. From the infrared on one end, long waves, to the ultraviolet on the other, short waves. Okay, we're down to 5% of the room. We'll come back to the Bible now. But anyhow, when you, I don't know if you've ever been into any one of these caves. I've never been to Carlsbad Caverns or the Oregon Caves. I went in Mexico. I went to one time, and somewhere else I went, but that was earlier in my life. I was a teenager, so I don't remember much from back then. But it was so dark, I always love it when I was with my dad. We were in Mexico, and my dad had some claustrophobia issues, and so we're on this father-son trip down in Mexico. I was in my 30s and whatever he was in, so 60s, and so we're in this cavern and with this group of people, and the guide says, "Here, I'll show you how dark it is," and he hits the switch, and I feel this hand grab my arm. "You there, John?" Like, "Yes, it's me. You grabbed me." Good thing you didn't grab someone else, Dad. But he said, "Just don't walk too fast." Where would I go? I can't see a thing. Where you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's a creepy feeling when it's really dark. I mean, the darkness in our in the room at night where you turn the lights off, it's nothing. Like when your eyes adjust, you can still see things. And that's fascinating too. You know, if you think about this, don't worry, we'll come back in a minute. But I was studying for something else. But you know, we have the rods and cones in our retina. So you have rods and cones. Cones, you have 110 million altogether. Who counted them all? Anyhow, 110 million of them. 10 million are the cones. And the 10 million cones are for daylight, you know, where you can pick up, I forget how many hundreds of hues. I was in the color business for years, and, you know, we think Roy G. Biv, you know, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, you know, and then you get your intermediate colors from there. But hundreds of hues, these cones are so precise. Isn't that amazing? Amen. That's nothing. There's 100 million rods from when the lights are off. And they pick up this much lower wavelength, you know, or photonic energy that can pick up those shadows, almost like black and white imagery in the dark. By the way, if you ever read Darwin's Origin of Species, he says in his appendix that when I consider the eye, I realize that the theory may be untenable. I guess so. And he didn't know a whole lot about the eye. They didn't know a whole lot about the eye then compared to what they know now. What does that have to do with the Bible? Well, it has to do with light. See, light reveals and light divides. Light divides that which is right from that which is not. Light shows what is wrong in the dark. We almost universally use this concept of the dark, darkness, as wrong, evil, dangerous, and light as good. It's universal. You don't have to be a Christian to say those kinds of things or to think those kind of things. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. That's not what bothered them, by the way. I am. And if you haven't done this yet, take a pen or your highlighter and highlight I am. Because we use I am all the time. We don't use it in the same way. Ego eimi, he's saying, that's how it comes out in Greek. And the same way in Hebrew, it's the divine name. He's using the divine name. I am, in a sense, I am the I am. He claims to be the voice of the burning bush. And he was saying that in chapter 6, you know, I'm the bread of life. Here, you know, I'm the light of the world as we go on. In all these 7 I am statements that he makes, this is what torques these guys, because he's claiming deity. We tend not to see that right off the bat. But in claiming deity, he's also saying, and I am the source of all this. So you study your Bible, just look up light in the Bible. There are so many references to light, Old and New Testament. You know, Daniel chapter 2, verse 22, that light is with him. God is light, 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. God is light, in him is no darkness at all. He says, I'm the light of the world. You know, I know I've said some of this before, but Alfred Edersheim is a great resource for those of you Bible students may know that, but Edersheim is a good resource for a lot of these things. Edersheim was an Orthodox rabbi who came to Christ at the end of the 1800s and became, of all things, an Episcopal priest. But he was an Orthodox rabbi. And he's written a number of books. You know, the favorite of most people who love to study their Bibles is Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. It's about that thick. And I think it's got like 4-point type in it. But anyhow, with really thin pages. But it's an incredible resource. And he describes what it was like in the first century in the temple area at the Feast of Tabernacles, because it was like a Feast of Lights. It wasn't Hanukkah, but it was like that. And there were multiple menorahs. You know, you think of the menorah, you know, most of us have seen a menorah, I think. You know, a 7-branched candle stand, 1 in the middle and 3 on each side. There's a lot we could go into. But anyhow, these were enormous, just enormous. They stood 65 feet tall, or there are 4 or 5 of them. They stood 65 feet tall in the temple courts. I mean, this is 10 feet. 65 feet high. And each of the bowls on each one of these, 7 on each menorah, each one held 65 or 60 liters of oil. And the flame would shoot up like 40 feet from the top of each one of those bowls. Now, if you know anything about what the temple looked like in those days, it was, these limestone walls with gold trim all around the top. So now you've got a flame, a vertical flame shooting up basically 90 feet, right, from the floor. So that's over the top of these walls. And from upwards of 50 miles away, you would see just this flame, like the whole thing was a flame. It's on top of the mountain in Jerusalem. It's 2,600 feet above sea level. So you'd be coming from the sea or coming from the desert. Whew, what you would see. Imagine how that would get your attention. These are in the days before people had light switches. Right? We take all this stuff for granted, like, oh, that's just another special effect. No, this is really powerful. What an image that was. For 7 days this went on. There's a lot more to it than that, but for our purposes this morning. And so there would be dancing, festivities, there'd be Thanksgiving, there was so much that would go on all of those 7 days. I mean, you can imagine, Psalm 100, think about what he says. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and enter his courts with praise. Be thankful to him, bless his name. I mean, we should live like that. But this was happening, this is something that would have been sung, certainly at Sukkot, at Tabernacles. Psalm 84, verse 10, for a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. So you've got these menorahs, and it's what a picture of the Shekinah glory of God. I think one of the things we often miss, Israel didn't miss it. They got it. When God led them out of Egypt and through the wilderness, there was a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But it was the same pillar. There weren't two pillars. So it was this pillar of cloud. It's an enormous thing. I mean, it's like a column that would go up, and of course it became like this huge mushroom over them, and it protected the nation from the sun and the heat. But as the sun would be going down, this pillar is lighting up because it contained fire. It was the Shekinah glory of God in that pillar. I mean, to me, it's just a breathtaking idea what that looked like. And God's saying, I'm with you. I'm protecting you. We always think of the pillar as leading them, which is true. God said, when you see the pillar move, pack up your tent. You don't want to stay here without it. Pack up your tent and follow. And when the pillar stops, then you can set up your tent again. God's saying, I'm your protector. I'm your provider. I'm the one who gives you direction. But now it's the 8th day. Now it's the 8th day, and those menorah aren't burning anymore. It's all shut down. It's cold. It's burnt out. It's charred. And here's Jesus saying, I'm the light of the world. He's saying, I'm the one. I'm the one who plagued the Pharaoh with all those plagues. I'm the one who led you out of Egypt. I'm the one who was with you throughout your wilderness wanderings. I'm the one who gave you water from the rock. I'm the one who gave you manna in the wilderness. I'm the one who opened up the Red Sea, who piled up the waters of the Jordan River in a heap. I'm the one who did that. You're saying, John, he didn't say that. He just said, I'm the light of the world. Oh, no. When he's saying, I am the I am, he's saying, I'm the one. I'm the one who did all those things. That's why they get torqued. See, the sad thing is, we just see it as another opinion. And there's a lot of other opinions around. But if Jesus is having an effect, or is going to have any kind of an effect on your life, if there's any transformation that's ever going to occur in your life, if there's any awareness of true provision and real life that ever comes in your life, it's going to happen because you appreciate this is not just an opinion. This is not just a philosophical comment, some theological nerd comment, but that this is a dividing point in the course of your life where you begin now to say, okay, if that's true, then I will follow this one. He says, he who follows me will not walk in darkness. Real quick, here's some things to think about. Revelation 22:16. I, Jesus, I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and the morning star. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. I'm Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, who is, who was, who is to come, the Almighty. I am the Alpha and the Omega. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, but he laid his right hand on me. I can't imagine what John was experiencing. He laid his hand on me, saying, don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. And all of God's people said, what? Amen, right? I am the light of the world, Jesus says. I am. He says to Abraham, Genesis chapter 15, verse 1, don't be afraid, Abraham. Abraham had reason to be afraid. If you study the context from the end of chapter 12 and on through chapters 13 and 14 and how he'd gone up against these kings of these 4 other nations. Now he thought there was going to be retribution. God says, don't be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield. What's that? A protector. I am your shield and your very great reward. In other words, I am your shield. I will protect you and I will provide for you. And yet, I look around at these faces. I know we all have our fears. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Compared to Abraham, what he was afraid of. What are you afraid of? Don't be afraid, he says. I am your protector. I am your provider. David says, Psalm 3, but you, O Lord, are a what? A shield about me. You're my glory. You're the lifter of my head. We walk around with our heads down. Lift my head. Be healthy. Look up. By the way, your redemption is drawing near. Amen. Psalm 115, verses 9 through 11. O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is your help, your shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is your help and your shield. You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. He is your help. He is your shield. To every single one of us, he's saying, just put your faith in him. He's the light of the world. He is your help. He is your shield. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. He's the God of direction. Now, guys tend not to be real good with directions. I mean, I think I'm pretty good with directions. I'm told that I'm not always. But I've heard a couple people who've gone to Israel with me on our mission trips, not on tours because we leave that to the bus driver. But I've been told that when we get to Jerusalem, I drive faster and a little crazier. But I always get to where I was planning to go, usually not when I thought I'd get there. But and I think I like maps, but I realize a lot of guys don't like maps. There's something, and I think women don't always appreciate that about men. And there's certain things, as much as we say we can do things, there's certain things we can't do. It's sort of in our genetic makeup. We just don't ask for directions. We don't, go for the map. I've learned to use GPS more, although I don't always believe it. But Jesus is the light. Jesus, so there's protection involved for us, but there's direction in our lives. Now, for some people, the idea of Jesus being the God of direction for us isn't really the way he means it. People don't always understand it the way he would mean it. We see him sort of as the crazy 8-ball sometimes, or magic 8-ball, not crazy 8-ball, the magic 8-ball, Should I do this or should I do that? Like that, he's not that. How do we find our direction? Your word, O Lord, is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. I've been a Christian long enough to have made a lot of mistakes and have heard others about their mistakes as well. And it would appear to me, or it seems to me, that one of the big mistakes that many of us make, is going by how we feel God is saying to us. I feel like God is telling me. And we take that as direction. Now, God speaks to us, there's no question about that, through prayer. But what he says is always supported by his word. And I would suggest to you, it's usually the other way around. It's what he's saying through his word first. If you have a regular time with the Lord, and you should. Every Christian, we don't have a problem feeding our bodies. But what we feed our souls is scary sometimes. What we feed our souls is like, your kid wakes up in the morning and says, I want Cocoa Puffs. Don't eat Cocoa Puffs. I mean, it's like going to destroy your brain. It's like 50% sugar, and but I need Cocoa Puffs. You don't need Cocoa Puffs. You want Cocoa Puffs. You don't need Cocoa Puffs. What you need is an egg, or you need something else. You need good food. It's no wonder our kids can't think in school. The same thing's true for so many of us in other aspects of our lives. The junk food. I mean, you're not going to get very far on a Twinkie and a Coke for breakfast. And yet, spiritually, that's what a lot of us do. There's a lot of spiritual junk food that goes into our ears. But the Bible is good food. The word's a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And I would suggest to you, and if you don't believe it, try it. How about this? Try engaging in an experiment in the supernatural. Seriously. Take a book of the Bible, read a chapter a day, carefully. Don't read for speed, read to feed. Take notes on what you're reading. And there are going to be times where God's going to say something to you through his word, and it's going to kind of just like stop you or cause you to say, write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper, a journal. And then keep it there. Pray about it. Say, Lord, I'm not sure exactly what you want me to do with this, but I trust you. And then move on. Keep reading. Pray. I'm going to tell you, it's very often that you're going to find that something you read this morning or tomorrow morning, whatever it is, in Zephaniah chapter 1 or whatever the case may be, sometime this week, something's going to come up at work or wherever you happen to be, and it's going to connect with this thought that came out of that scripture. How does that work? I don't know. God figures that out. His word is alive, powerful, sharper than a double-edged sword. God does that. But I'm going to tell you, if you'll do that, he will give you direction. Yes, he gives us his protection. He gives us direction. He's the light of the world. We're in a place in our day right now. I'm not going there now because we don't have any time. But the church in general in America has come to a very dangerous place. A very dangerous place. And what I am not talking about is what the government is doing. And yet, because the church is not walking with Jesus Christ, we will inadvertently, in many cases, end up submitting to what the government says to us. And the persecution that will come down on the church will have much to do with the church not having taken a stand and following our king instead of an agency. I'm telling you, this is a very serious issue. And part of the reason for that is that many who are in the church, who are you talking about, John? I don't know. The shoe fits. This is a very serious thing I'm saying. Many who are in the church, if you're familiar with Matthew 13, the parable of the wheat and the tares, then you might have a sense of what I'm getting at. Many who are in the church who have believed a false gospel. But use the same words that a true believer would use, will eventually affect the direction of the church. That's the place we're at in the church in America right now. It's a dangerous place. But Jesus says, I am the light of the world. If you believe in me, if you follow me, you will not walk in darkness. Those who don't follow him will walk in darkness. Jesus said it, John chapter 3, men agape darkness more than light. People do, it's a weird thing. They agape, they have this unconditional love for the darkness. And sometimes even a believer can turn and go crazy. But if they're a true believer, they'll come back. And Jesus said, he says, I'm the light of the world. He also said in Matthew chapter 5, you're the light of the world. Isn't that interesting? See, if you place your faith in Jesus Christ and his Holy Spirit comes and takes up residence in you, now you and I are the light of the world. Paul says in Philippians chapter 2 that we are living in the midst of a crooked and a perverse generation. That was 2,000 years ago. Look at the generation we're living in now. A crooked and a perverse generation among whom you shine as lights in the world. That's what we're called to. We're called to shine. We're not called to hide our light under a bushel. We're called to stand out. It's not about politics. We need to cut it out with the politics stuff. What we need to do more than anything else is to stand up and follow our King, who is the light of the world. That's a dangerous place because there's pain that may come in that. Ask Ken Graves. Ask these two pastors, one in Ontario and one in Alberta right now, serving prison time because of the stand they've taken. Oh, it's coming. I believe it. And I can say it boldly from a pulpit. I hope I can be as bold when it happens. But these are the days that we live in. And Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. If you follow me, you will not walk in darkness, but you'll have the light of life. What he offers to me, to you, to all of us is so much more than we ever could have any other way. And one day we will see how puny were our desires. We look at the things we were clamoring for in this life compared to all that he really was offering us in this life, let alone in the age to come.